Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BRASS 101, kicking off yet another season from the Bryce and Ronnie Athlete Snow Safety Foundation. We have a great program for you here tonight, and thank you very much for taking the time and the energy to be here tonight to learn a little bit about how you can be safe as we head into the season. Periodically through the evening, you'll see a QR code up on the screen. We encourage you to use your phone and tag that and send a little donation to BRASS. It helps us to put programs like this on for free. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce someone who has been passionate about this cause for 8 years now. And Cindy Burlak has done a lot to improve the attitude of safety, particularly in the ski racing community after the loss of her son, Ronnie. And with that, Cindy, why don't you kick off this season of BRASS 101?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to BRASS 101 from the Burlak House. As you can see, we're getting ready for Halloween, and we're hoping each of you are and have that you have a fun and safe holiday. I actually have a Dutch oven here that I'm about to put a magic potion in, which I love to do from time to time. And when I do put a magic potion together, I think about what I would like it to bring me. And what I'd like it to bring me is Ronnie back. We're so thankful. Ronnie and Bryce are thankful that you are here to listen to our program tonight. You are minimizing the chance that your families and friends will have to go through what we Burlaks and Astles have since 2015. I was recently at a global snow safety conference, and I deeply feel that our program, it fills a dire need in the avalanche system. There's excellent science out there, many smart people, a lot of good practices, but everyone from the beginning of when you're in snow a lot needs the information that you will hear tonight. We're so thankful that you are beginning your path, or maybe continuing it, towards staying safe while training, racing, or playing in winter's beauty. I'd like to introduce Ben Mirkin. He's our presenter tonight, and we're so thankful to have him here. And we're really appreciative of Tom Kelly, who works his magic on these shows. Ben has been with BRASS. He's been a presenter for 5 years, the length of our program. He's a faculty member at Vermont State University in the outdoor education program, where he teaches management of ski resorts and adventure leadership, including mountain guiding. He has just finished helping his program become the one and only program in the country accredited by the American Mountain Guides Association. Ben is a longtime area avalanche course leader who also guides rock and ice climbing and backcountry skiing. Ben lives next to Burke Mountain in Vermont, where he loves being part of the racing community as he patrols once a week. Otherwise, he's on his mountain bike with his family, traveling throughout North America and beyond in search of steep and snowy and stable slopes. Thanks for being here, Ben.
Thank you very much, Cindy. It is my pleasure to be here. And I'm gonna take it all away and get right into it without further ado. So the bullet points on this slide are things that we hope by the end of the presentation, you'll have a better understanding of. I won't read them to you because I know you can do that yourselves. So we'll save time for questions at the end. I will ask you some questions during the presentation, and I encourage you to drop questions you have right into the chat as they arrive. Tom will feel free to give me a nudge with your questions throughout, and any questions we don't get to, we'll try to get to at the end. This is an avalanche awareness presentation geared toward racers and coaches, and we'll highlight some of the resources that the BRASS Foundation has specifically designed for the competitive sports community. If you're finding yourself going out of bounds at ski areas or into the backcountry, we recommend taking a formal avalanche course. These courses are multiple days in length, and we'll go deeper into all these topics than we can possibly cover in the next hour. Question you should be asking yourself is, do your skiing and riding abilities match your avalanche knowledge? Because so many of you are such talented skiers and riders, it's often going to be assumed that you know more about avalanches than you do. Being able to admit you don't know is huge and really important. The purpose of this presentation is not to make you an avalanche expert. It's just to give you more tools surrounding avalanches, avalanche mitigation practices domestically and internationally, and provide some additional resources to help you better understand the risk that surrounds our mountains. So why is avalanche education important? As competitive snow sport athletes, the mountains are our training grounds. Because of this, we need to know about some of the objective hazards that exist in the mountains. Avalanches are one of these hazards. They don't care if you're the best skier or rider on the mountain. During this presentation, we want to give you more tools to begin to understand and recognize avalanche hazard. Objective hazards are hazards that we can't control. As competitive snow sports athletes, you already think about the things like this, and you manage risk for yourself all the time. For example, weather's something you have no control over. So on competition days, you think about your wax, you think about your edges, and you think about the things you can control. Your mental attitude, the training and preparation you've done prior, your warm-up, etc. Avalanches fall into things that we cannot control. So we gain more tools to learn about how to avoid them and to manage our risks when we're around them. The photo on the left is April 25th of last spring in Utah at Park City in the Olympic Park. And on the right, that is in Verbier in Switzerland of March of last year, the Freeride World Tour. A couple folks were caught in this slide and partially buried. Everyone made it out safely. But these photos are a reminder that avalanches can affect us as winter athletes, even if we aren't going into the backcountry. Thinking more deeply about the mountains and snow around you are key to understanding and managing risk. We're going to talk about a few near misses. I'm going to start right here.
Där också! Vad är det som händer? What? Alla drar. Nu kommer vi här i luften. Vi klarar oss. Alltså, alltså det är så sjukt sketch. What? Den kommer ta den. Den kommer in i banan. Jo. Nej, jo. Den åker in rätt in i banan ju.
This is dramatic footage from March of last year from France
Oh my God.
at a slopestyle event. And we as the ski community were really lucky that everyone at this World Cup slopestyle event did come home that day. There were no injuries. It was just a near miss. This presentation is scattered with some near misses. Let's take a look at one closer to home. Last spring in April of last year at Snowbird, Utah. As you can see from the picture here on the right, the avalanche started and the debris pile slid inbounds. Again, no one was injured in this slide. Ski Patrol did a search of the area and ruled out that anyone was there. But these are examples showing that even if you are skiing and riding inbounds in the US, you need to be aware of the terrain that's above you and around you. The mountains as your training ground for your sport where you spend a ton of time. Due to this, you may be spending time in a variety of snow climates. This map shows different snow climates around the world, and different climates result in different snow and avalanche conditions. What you may have learned about snow and avalanche conditions in your home area may be very different than what you experience in other parts of the world. In Europe, more so even than in North America, you may experience very different snow conditions, snow and avalanche conditions across very short distances, such as valley to valley. Last spring, I had the privilege of skiing a bit in Chamonix and was amazed how different the avalanche conditions could be just a few miles away in a different valley. So while traveling this winter, keep in mind that you are constantly changing snow climates. Be familiar with where to find avalanche forecasts, and keep in mind the different avalanche mitigation processes for the ski areas that you're in. We don't expect you to be experts, but we want to give you the tools to find out what the experts are telling us about the avalanche conditions for that day. I will give you more information later in this talk and for you to find all the information you need. On the left here are some avalanche fatality statistics. As you can see, avalanche fatalities do vary per country. In Europe, it is easier to access avalanche terrain, and this is one of the reasons we see higher fatalities than in the US and Canada. Since many of you will be traveling to lots of different places, we want you to be aware of how the statistics vary in different parts of the world. So keep an eye on this one. That's another near miss. The question is to think about here is, what is an avalanche? Just skiing on resort, European resort, and then this. This was more than a near miss. There was a fatality involved in this avalanche. And this avalanche started out of bounds, off-piste, as they say in Europe, which we'll talk more about later, and it ran into the ski area boundaries. So the question we ask is, what is an avalanche? Simply put, it's a mass of snow moving downhill. So what do you think we need to have an avalanche? This is the recipe for an avalanche. First, we have avalanche terrain, a slope greater than 30 degrees in steepness, which we'll talk more about, or connected terrain that is connected to a slope 30 degrees or greater. You ski mostly in bounds. This looks like a steep blue or a black ski run at many of your local resorts. It is super important to be able to begin to recognize avalanche terrain, because this is the one leg of the triangle that we have control over, the terrain that we choose to go in. As competitive snow sports athletes, you also want to be aware of what slope angle you're skiing and what is above you. Why do you think it's important to be aware of what terrain is above us? We don't want to be stopped or regroup underneath avalanche terrain if we can avoid it. It doesn't matter if you are inbounds, on a Nordic trail, or in the backcountry. Anytime, whether there's avalanche hazard or not stopping in the run-out zone of a possible avalanche path is a good habit to get into. Another leg is unstable snow. The avalanche forecaster bulletin, as they call it in other parts of the world, are going to be our biggest clue about if we have unstable snow. Read the bulletin and the experts will tell you. Often this can mean strong over weak layering. More on this to come. As competitive snow sports athletes, you may be in one snow climate one day and a totally different one the next. It's important to keep reading those avalanche forecasts and using your resources. The final leg of this triangle is the trigger. Something has to trigger the avalanche. This could be a person, could also be an animal, or weather, or explosives during mitigation. In different parts of the world, ski patrol is controlling inbounds runs differently with explosives, with Gazax, with other methods. It's important to have an idea of what avalanche mitigations practices are occurring where you're skiing and where they're occurring. Avalanche terrain is defined as terrain that is 30 degrees or greater. It's important to think about terrain that you are on and consider if it is or could be avalanche terrain. It's also important to look at the terrain that's connected to the slope you're on and ask yourself if the terrain above you is avalanche terrain. Think about if a slope is avalanche terrain, whether or not you're skiing in or out of bounds. Get your mind tuned into this hazard. Ask yourself, are we in avalanche terrain? Are we regrouping below avalanche terrain? Recognizing this terrain is something that takes practice. So start thinking about it and practicing regularly. Inclinometers, like you see in the photo on the left, can help measure slope angle. Many compasses can also be used in this way. And if you get the right app, so can your phone. Another tool that you may hear and see people using is topographic maps or apps that have slope angle shading, like the picture on the right. This can be a great tool because as you're planning for the day, you can see what avalanche terrain is around you. This is from a program called CalTopo. The picture on the right is Alyeska ski area in Alaska. The yellow color means you're getting close to avalanche terrain. As you can see in the scale here, 27 to 29 degrees or so. And then as the colors get more intense, so does the terrain. Terrain traps are any terrain feature that increases the consequence of being caught in an avalanche. Essentially, with a terrain trap, a small amount of snow becomes enough to bury or kill a person. A few critical examples of terrain tracks are cat tracks or road cuts, like you see in the lower right corner. Those can be found inbounds all over the place. Crevasses that open up in glacial areas, like you see in the photo on the upper left from Mount Hood. Gullies, where all the terrain funnels into one place, and trees. In the East, where people don't think we have many avalanches, and we don't have nearly as much as we do in big Western areas, we often have slide paths that end in trees that are often referred to as bread slicers. And we know these terrain traps well because we don't want to be the bread going through the slicer. That photo on the upper left there is Mount Hood. It's an older photo, but you can clearly see up here above, these are crevasses opening up just above the lanes. So not far from where racers are trained. Thinking about avalanche terrain and connected terrain is key. Remembering avalanche terrain is anything greater than 30 degrees, like a steep blue or a black diamond in bounds. Practice looking at and measuring avalanche terrain. Please be aware of the connected terrain. Early in this presentation, we showed videos of why that's important. Remember that dramatic powder cloud coming down the slope? If you are spending time in the backcountry, please get more education and practice recognizing avalanche terrain. Terrain traps are any place where the consequence of being caught in an avalanche increases. Terrain is the piece of the avalanche recipe that we have control over. This is why it's so important that we begin to have an understanding of what avalanche terrain looks like. And we're constantly checking in about that terrain. Trying to get that understanding every day that you're out is critical. Now that we've talked quite a bit about avalanche terrain, the leg of the that is the leg of the triangle that we have control over. Even riding inbounds, we make critical decisions about what to ski, where to regroup, and we want to be thinking about what terrain is controlled or managed by patrol and what is the terrain around us. When it comes to thinking about if we have the conditions to have, we need to have unstable snow and what could trigger an avalanche. For that, we defer to the experts. The way we find out about this information is by reading the avalanche forecast or bulletin. The recipe for an avalanche is demonstrated on this picture on the left. Strong over weak layering in the snowpack. Storms come in with different conditions, warm, cold, dry, wet, and they create layers in the snowpack. Above that thin-looking snow here, we see light through a denser, we see the light, and above it is a denser, stronger layer. We're worried about this strong over weak layering. Avalanche bulletins can give you an understanding of what's below your feet. I'm going to play this video here on the right. See that skier at the bottom in low angle terrain making powder turns. Well, they're connected to the steeper slope above. Keep an eye out. You see that snow start moving? The video goes back to normal in a second here. There it is. Oh, fairly sizable avalanche was just triggered. Clearly the person filming was surprised. The skier near the bottom of the slope collapsed a weak layer, and the fracture traveled or propagated uphill to the connected steeper terrain above. This is called a remote trigger and was a pretty scary avalanche. It's important to know that 90% of avalanche fatalities are triggered by the victim or someone in the victim's group. Triggers, to remind you, can be people, they can be animals, they can be explosive, or they can be natural, such as wind loading, lots of snow, sun, rain, changes of the density in the snowpack. So far, we've discussed why avalanche education is important, the basic recipe for an avalanche, and focused a bit on avalanche terrain. This is all meant to create an introduction to help you learn to speak avalanche. It's critical to know how to find information directly from the experts about what the avalanche conditions are, because as competitive snow sports athletes, you may be in the US one day, Europe for a few days, then Canada the next week. The conditions all may be very different, and it's hard to keep track of all that. So please take note of where you can find avalanche forecasts and bulletins. Avalanche.org gets you to all the forecasts in the US. Add an S to the avalanche for avalanches.org for European sites. And Canada is just avalanche.ca. At the end of this presentation, near the end, we'll show you on the BRASS website where you can find links to all the forecast centers around the world. What information should we be trying to take away from reading an avalanche bulletin? What are they telling us? Check this out. So it's telling us a lot of different things here. Staying below tree line, above tree line, how we can trigger an avalanche, what aspects on the compass rose are most likely, and what type of avalanche problems, the size, possibility. That's from Colorado. And then we come across here and we're looking in Europe. This is, well, it'll zoom in a little and show different areas. Often they start with these maps and then they all have somewhat similar, oops, sorry about that, similar icons. And give us a ton of information, level 3 or considerable. And it talks about below tree line, old snow, wet snow, what the problem is. Telling us all the critical information. Again, now this is moving along. Each area has their own take with a lot of commonalities. And even this is, as many of us would like to go, in Japan, telling us more about their avalanche danger. Again, very similar. Compass rose, danger ratings, and information about avalanche snowpack, recent activity. A whole lot of information. The more you read it, the easier it gets. Let's start by explaining a bit more about avalanche danger levels. This is the American Danger Rating Scale. Avalanche danger tells us about the likelihood of an avalanche and the related size. A few things to take away from this. The scale increases exponentially, both in terms of likelihood of an avalanche and the consequence of being caught. We want you to look beyond the colors. As you spend time reading avalanche forecasts, we encourage you to associate considerable with the travel advice, the likelihood and size and distribution. So you begin to associate each of these colors with the consequences, how avalanches may be triggered and how large they may be. Sometimes an avalanche rating can be moderate because of a thin wind slab being likely in a certain area. So you may choose to avoid those areas, especially if they have a terrain trap below them. And you could avoid those areas and still find good skiing and manage your risk. This is an easier moderate rating to manage than something called a persistent slab, where large avalanches are possible in isolated areas. By reading the bulletin, not just looking at the rating, you can better understand these differences. The more often you read and think about these messages, the easier it becomes to understand what they're talking about. You'll get better at speaking avalanche. So, which danger ratings do you think most avalanche accidents happen in? These statistics from Colorado avalanche fatalities are representative of when we see the most avalanche accidents happen, which is during moderate and considerable avalanche danger. People still trying to get out there and enjoy the fresh snow, but the snowpack not necessarily being agreeable to that. The day that Bryce and Ronnie's accident happened, the danger level was considerable, or level 3. Here's an example of what an avalanche forecast may look like in North America. This is from the Teton area. The first thing we want to look for is the date. How current is the forecast? Some avalanche centers are putting out messages in the morning and the evening. Some are once a week. We want to know that our information is current. Then we try to look through all the information. Like we said in the last slides, we want to get as much information as we can from the experts. You'll notice that this forecast gives you information about weather, about avalanche danger, avalanche problems, and where it's located. So if we look here, we're seeing that compass rose that in this case, it's not at low elevation, but it's at all aspects around the compass rose. And at low elevation, we have low avalanche danger. So important to know. Things to consider. Every avalanche forecast is for a zone or a region. It doesn't apply to each specific slope, but it gives you big picture general information that you take with you into the field to make decisions. Forecasts can be accurate for the range, but there can be some variability within it on certain slopes. When you're in Europe, some of the ski areas will issue their own avalanche forecasts. They tend to know their slopes pretty well, and they want to warn you of dangers that they see occurring. On the BRASS Foundation page, which this is a little screenshot of, you can click on forecasts. And you can scroll down, you'll see the links to avalanche forecasts, both domestically and internationally. We strongly encourage you to take advantage of this resource. We are trying to be a resource for you. Please use it. The more practice you can get reading the forecast, the more information you can glean from them. Try to make reading your local forecast or the forecast of the place you know you're going to be traveling to part of your daily routine. It's free. And you can even subscribe and get those avalanches sent to you daily for free and really keep in touch with it. So there are these things called red flags that are super critical to notice. When we're out in the mountains, these are signs that we want to be especially aware of and talk to our group that we're with if we see any of them, right? Voicing your concerns is key in avalanche terrain. Being courageous enough to speak to your group and tell them what you're seeing. Likely, several of these red flags are also impacting your ability to compete or train on these days. Likely the plan is changing. This was what happened that day to Bryce and Ronnie for the day of their accident. The plan changed due to weather, and something we can learn from that is before we go out free skiing and enjoy that new snow, take a minute and ask yourselves and your team what the mountains are telling you today. So here are a few red flags to help us identify billboards of avalanche danger. If you see recent avalanche activity, you know avalanches are occurring now. If as you're skiing along, you see cracks shooting off your skis or collapsing, you hear that whoomph, then you have a weak layer, you have the ability to propagate a crack. These are red flags. If you look up at the ridge and you see snow being moved, that means that it's wind drifting. And on that side that it's landing on, it's going to be likely very touchy avalanche conditions. If you have heavy snowfall or rain, we're talking about a foot of snow or an inch of liquid. That is going to significantly impact the snowpack, or even just not even a foot of snow, but a lot of snow, a couple of inches in a short time will be really impactful, as well as rapidly rising temperatures, especially if those temperatures go above freezing. Those are big red flags. And for this group, we've added a sixth red flag, and that is training or competition being canceled because of weather. These are often days when things are more uncertain and plans are being adjusted. If this happens, this is a reminder to talk to your coaches and teammates about avalanche hazard, especially if the plan changes to free skiing for that day. Like we just learned in avalanche terrain, if we do go out free skiing, let's remember to think about where we're regrouping, connected terrain, and terrain traps, even if we are skiing and riding inbounds in North America. As we travel around the world, it's important to have an idea of what terrain is managed and where it is unmanaged. Know where the managed terrain ends and the unmanaged terrain begins. North America and Europe are very different. In area and out of area are North American terms, whereas on-piste and off-piste are European terms, often used in South America too. In both North America and New Zealand, Ski Patrol does their best to mitigate avalanche hazard within ski area boundaries. As soon as you leave ski area boundaries, which are typically marked, you are in the backcountry. In the backcountry, there is no avalanche mitigation, so it's important that you're heading into the backcountry with the proper equipment, with a plan, and that you've read the avalanche forecast at a minimum. The photo on the right is from Lake Louise, and it's a good example of why it's important to respect those closures inbounds in North America. This is an area that patrol closed that day because they suspected a weak layer. Note that the avalanche here digs through a mogul run. For all of us East Coasters, it's key to remember when you're skiing or riding at Western resorts, midwinter, whenever, don't be lured by other competitive snow sports athletes saying, oh, it's just across the boundary. It's really close. It's like it's inbounds. If it's not inbounds, it is the backcountry. Do your own research. Make a plan for what is acceptable terrain before you get to the slopes. In the US, Canada, and New Zealand, we talk about in area and out of area. In Europe and South America, the terms are on-piste and off-piste. Generally, on-piste is groomed. Off-piste is not groomed, but is marked with black markers. In Europe, as we see in the picture on the left here, the trail map, green is generally easy, blue is intermediate, but some places blue can be easy. Red is advanced or difficult, but Austria and Switzerland, red is intermediate. Between blue and black is red. And then black is expert or very advanced. Yellow is not groomed, but is managed as avalanche terrain. Know where the managed terrain ends and the unmanaged begins. North America and New Zealand are different than Europe and South America. Also, remember that when we ski in the Southern Hemisphere in our summer, that is their wintertime, and avalanches occur frequently. Off-piste is not controlled. If there are ever any questions that you have when you're at an area, ask Ski Patrol for that area. They will be able to tell you all about their avalanche mitigation, where it occurs and where it does not. You will see avalanche danger signs. Here are a few examples of avalanche danger signs. Not everything is always going to be in English. There may be avalanche signboards too, which aren't always obvious to spot, but if you're looking for them, you'll see them. So hopefully this slide lets you know a little bit more about what to be looking for. If you're going into the backcountry, off-piste in other parts of the world, and you're going into avalanche terrain, we encourage you to think about the following ideas on this slide. Trip planning. Have a plan and discuss it with your partners prior to going into uncontrolled areas. This includes reading avalanche bulletins, discussing key points from it, and looking at maps with your partners. Think about your terrain choices. This is the piece that you can control. Choose terrain wisely. Also important to have a plan B. If you get there in plan A, you're what you wanted to ski, you're seeing shooting cracks, you're seeing wind loading, having a second choice that so you're not totally committed is really critical. You want to continue to evaluate what's happening around you while you're out there. Be looking for those red flags. And have avalanche equipment with you that you know how to use and that you've practiced with. Bit about avalanche equipment. Avalanche transceivers or beacons, shovels, and probes are the bare minimum equipment we should carry with us in the backcountry. Many people carry this equipment inbounds on certain days, and if traveling to Europe, we want to think about off-piste terrain the same as the backcountry. So having your equipment at a resort is important. The transceiver, 3-antenna transceiver, is the modern standard. These work with different brands. They all work together. But you need to practice with this piece of equipment. It's super key to being efficient with it. Get the gear and make sure your friends have the gear and practice using it together. The probe, the average depth of burial if someone's caught in an avalanche is about 1.5 meters, almost 5 feet. Your avalanche transceiver can get you as close as possible to a buried person. Then the probe is used to pinpoint the location of the buried individual. Consider having a probe that's at least 2.5 meters long. Once you've hit someone with the probe, you leave the probe where you struck the person, and then the hard work begins. The shovel. Avalanche debris is like snowplow debris. If you've ever tried to shovel that, you know the challenge. It's firm and hard to shovel through. Shoveling is the part of the rescue that takes the longest, and we want to practice this. There are strategic shoveling techniques that can be the difference between life and death. Generally, you want a shovel that's made of metal, usually a lightweight aluminum that has an extendable an extendable handle like the one shown in the picture here. You and your partners all need a beacon on your body and a shovel and probe in your backpack, at minimum, to enter avalanche terrain. This is what can save you if you make a bad decision. Beyond that gear, think about what else can happen out there. Going back to those safety nets, think about the first aid and repair kit, communication device, radios, and the last resort of Reco. Warm layers, food, and a helmet are all part of your safety nets to help you making good decisions and taking care of yourselves. If you own or plan on owning this equipment, traveling into avalanche terrain, be sure you have a solid kit with you and that you and the buddies you ski with are regularly practicing with it. The people you travel in the backcountry with all need the right tools and knowledge, as well as being willing to admit they're unsure or nervous. I encourage all of you to take an avalanche course with the friends that you most like to ski with. All of you getting on the same page and learning these dangers and the use of this equipment is critical. Going out of bounds and into the backcountry comes with responsibility. It can also be amazing and wonderful, and we want you to be able to enjoy it and come home day after day. The BRASS Foundation website has a bunch of resources for you. BRASSAvalanche.org. It is a great resource if you're looking to learn more of the basics. Today, we scraped the surface of a lot of information, but there is still so much to learn. On the BRASS site, you can also find recordings of previous BRASS 101s like these. They've changed a lot over the years, but all with relevant information. Most importantly, if you do find yourself going out of bounds or being in the backcountry, whether you're going snowmobiling, skiing, riding, filming buddies, going out for a photo shoot, whatever it is, we recommend taking a formal avalanche course, like an Avalanche 1. Do it with your friends. You will have a ton of fun while learning information that can help keep you alive. Today's presentation is an avalanche awareness presentation and a great start or refresher to your avalanche education. We thank you for being part of it. We appreciate you being here today and hope you can utilize this information this winter. On this slide is a brief list of what we covered today. Please keep in mind, this was just a brief introduction to avalanche knowledge. I asked you to teach me to be a ski racer in 45 minutes, you would laugh. That's how I feel right now. I've spent the past 25 years trying to learn all I can about avalanches, mainly so I can ski the best powder possible, but I still find myself frequently being confused and being wrong. And I'm always trying to continue learning about avalanches. What I'm getting at is there is a lot to learn in the avalanche world, and education helps you access good skiing and fun terrain. We tried to get you key info, but more training is needed. As you travel the world racing, please stay avalanche aware. Get the forecast wherever you're traveling to. If you enjoy skiing beyond groomed terrain, get additional training. You'll learn a ton and have a blast doing it. Try to make your ability to understand avalanche terrain and danger a little closer to your ski ability. Please reach out to the BRASS Foundation with anything that comes up, and I am happy to answer questions as time allows. So we will open up the floor for questions.
Ben, thank you very much for that presentation. We will open the floor for questions right now. We just ask you to pop the question into the chat or into the Q&A box, whichever is your pleasure, but we've got about 10 minutes here. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Anonymous attendee is saying, hey, Ben, so avalanches, they're pretty dangerous, huh?
They sure are. Yes, avalanches are really dangerous. They can be everything from just knocking you off your feet and spraining an ankle to death. Incredibly traumatic, depending on the size and location of avalanches. And it is amazing how touchy slopes can be at certain times.
By the way, while we're waiting for some other questions, there's a QR code in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Hey, please feel free to check that and check the link and drop us a 5, a 10, a 20, a 50, whatever, to help put these programs on for free for the hundreds and hundreds of people who've taken advantage of this. So happy to take your questions now. Just pop them into the chat or the Q&A. Ben, I'm going to go back to something you talked about earlier, and I always wonder about this a little bit. You mentioned using your avalanche beacon in the boundaries of a ski area. Is that something that people do? Is that advisable on certain days?
Absolutely. So anytime there's been a storm, I am without question going to be wearing my avalanche beacon in area. I can actually, just last spring when I was in Chamonix, we had a storm day and we started each of our tours in area. And I was amazed at the amount of avalanche activity in area. While the resorts are trying really hard to protect the groomed slopes, anything that isn't groomed or doesn't hang over a groomed slope was not controlled. And people were triggering avalanches frequently all over the ski area on lift access terrain that was off-piste, meaning not groomed. So yes. Also, like I can tell you, when I'm in Jackson, when I'm in wherever it is, traveling and skiing, if I'm at a resort and it's a storm day, avalanche danger is elevated, I'm going to wear my beacon at minimum.
Okay, we've got a bunch of questions. We'll get to them in a minute. Mario Musil, though, has his hand raised. And Mario, go ahead and give us your question. And you just need to unmute. So Mario, if you're still with us, the floor is yours to ask your question. If not, we'll move on. We have a question from Mickey Farah. Do you have any recommendations on avalanche education programs for kids?
Absolutely. So a great starter online for free is Know Before You Go. A bunch of great videos and things, the interactive things you can do online, but also kids can take a level 1 avalanche course. My daughter is 11. I have given her some avalanche education at home, even though she doesn't ski that steep of terrain. But I know that by the time she does, I will have her take a course. I've done several courses. I live right near the White Mountains, and I've done several courses for excellent young skiers that are 13, 14, 15 years old that are gonna ski in that terrain, whether their parents want them to or not. And so getting a group of them together and doing a private avalanche course that's just for them. 6-to-1 ratio is kind of the most people will do generally with one instructor, but you can go out with a group of 6, adolescents who are psyched about skiing and have a really great learning experience. And feel free to reach out to me or to BRASS to find instructors in your area who want to do that sort of thing. I also see there's a similar question about someone who doesn't ski or snowboard, but is snowshoeing or mountaineering. And there are courses, some courses will allow you to snowshoe with them. Generally, they want you to be on something that slides, but I've taught courses that are mountaineer specific for climbers, for ice climbers and mountaineers, snowshoers, and they've been a lot of fun as well.
We've got a question too about the avalanche beacon. Can you talk a little bit more about the two-way capabilities of send and receive for someone who hasn't used a beacon before?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you put a beacon on, you turn it on and it is sending a signal. That signal goes about 60, 70 meters. And what happens is if someone were buried in an avalanche, the people in their party are their best resource for rescue. Their people in their party then all turn their beacons to search, right? Because originally they're in send, they're sending a signal, they switch their beacons to search, and then their beacon directs them with both flashing arrows and decreasing numbers to get to the person once they get the signal there. That is a process that takes practice. Just pulling it out of the package and running out to the slopes, you're going to be a very ineffective searcher. It takes a lot of practice. At a level 1 course, you'll get an intro to how to do it right, and you'll get a little bit of practice, and you'll learn how to practice. And then it's up to you to practice regularly. Having nights with friends where you all bring your beacons and you bury them in the yard and you take turns is a really great way to do it. There's also one-day avalanche rescue courses that spend the entire day focused on rescue techniques, and that can be a great tool.
Just looking for any other questions. Anyone has a question, you're welcome to
See
put
one
it.
just popped up about, is there a particular brand or style of beacon you recommend? I've seen on heli-cat trips, there are several days, and I wish we had beacons, even inbound. Yeah, so I would say there are tons of great beacons. The tracker is kind of the classic, super easy to use, really powerful, really fast processor. Mammoth makes great beacons. Ortovox makes great beacons. Arva. There are any of these new 3 antenna beacons. The newer ones have faster processors, meaning they will get the information and help you get to someone a little bit faster. They also have a little further range. So yeah, I would say that all the new beacons are great, and reading the reviews out there, and generally simple is good if you're using it, if you're not using it every day and practicing with it all the time. That still should practice, but simple is good.
Then we have a classic question that we hear all the time. We have from Charlotte Van Dam. She's very comfortable skiing the deepest of powder. She's very comfortable in ski resorts here in America where avalanche danger is mitigated, but she's going on a trip to Switzerland. What advice would you give her relative to the groomed surfaces, the off-piste surfaces that can help her to be safe?
Well, the first piece of advice is to read the bulletins. Read the bulletins, avalanche bulletins. In the days leading up to your trip, figure out where you're going. The other piece of advice is hire a guide. When you get there, if you hire a guide, even just for one day, they're going to show you wonderful terrain, have you ski untracked snow, and teach you about managing the risk, teach you about the snowpack there. It is incredible. I can tell you, when I travel to a new snowpack, and I am a guide, I often try very hard to ski with another guide on my first day or two to get a feel for the snowpack and the terrain. Europe, it's incredible with a guide how much you can ski in a day. You're using the lift to access the backcountry, and it really is amazing. Your tour begins, 4,000 vert up or 6,000 vert up, or if you're taking the Midi, 10, 11,000 vert up the slope. So it really is, hiring a guide is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, I really want to second that. And that's something that I felt a lot more comfortable with. And let's all remember, you're going to see this in the video coming up with Off Piste, but Bryce and Ronnie lost their lives because they simply exited a groomed trail. It was a great groomed trail. They simply went off a little bit into another piece that was open powder, and it cost them their lives. We have another question. We'll take a couple of more here, but there used to be a snorkel type breathing device and seems to have gone off the market. Is this something that we should look into, or just kind of a gimmick?
Yeah, so the snorkel worked, but what it meant is before you started skiing downhill, you had to put the snorkel in your mouth, and people weren't really doing it. So those have they were called the Avalon. So those have kind of gone away. They've been replaced by some really good technology in the form of avalanche airbags. And the idea of an airbag is it makes you larger and brings you to the surface. They, if used properly, practiced with, they can work, right? They're not foolproof. People still die with airbags on, but they do work. To be honest, I'm looking at all the new ones coming out this year. They've gotten lighter, which is a factor, right? They used to be about 10 pounds. Now they're down to closer to 5. Some of the new ones that have just come out. They're also now rechargeable, as opposed to needing to fill a gas canister that you couldn't fly with. So now you can fly with them. So I think the airbag packs are really helpful, right? They're one more tool to help us manage the consequence. Hopefully we're making good decisions and not getting buried, not triggering avalanches. But this is a tool where if you do trigger an avalanche, it's going to lessen the consequence for you.
Got time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. If anyone has anything, please put them into the chat or into the Q&A. We've had some good ones here tonight, and Ben's been able to cover all of them. But any last questions before we move on? We have Alice Merryweather from the U.S. ski team coming up as our featured athlete tonight here on Brass 101. So any other final questions? Or Ben, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all, and hope that you continue to learn about avalanches, seek some more formal avalanche education, and have great winters out there on the slopes.
Ben, thank you very much. And by the way, we will have a recording of this available on the Brass social media channels and also at brassavalanche.org. But Ben, thank you very much. 5th year being with us. You're one of our original instructors. We appreciate the time and the energy you put into helping keep everyone on the call safe.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you all for being here.
Ben Mirkin, thank you. We've got Alice Merryweather coming up. Stand by a second. We'll make just a quick screen change. Okay, there we go. Before Alice comes on, I just want to make another pitch. If you can scan the QR code in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, make a little donation tonight. That will help us here at Brass to continue to provide these Brass 101 sessions for free to so many hundreds, thousands of individuals who've been able to take these over the last few years. Okay, now I got the right slide up there. So I want to introduce Alice Merryweather, and I was so thrilled a few months back to hear that Alice Merryweather was back on skis and looking to make her way back to the team. A great skier who came out of New England, particularly in Attitash, went to school in Stratton, won a junior world title, and was on her way to the top when all of a sudden a training injury took its toll back in September of 2021. And it has been a long road back, but she is back on skis and ready to go. And Alice, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. And you're
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to Brass and Cindy and Tom. I'm stoked to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. And first of all, where are you coming to us from tonight?
I'm in Park City right now, getting kind of the last few weeks of strength training before heading to Colorado, going to Copper for most of November, and then over to Europe for the race season.
So are you training at the USANA Center of Excellence?
Indeed, every day.
It's kind of been your home for a while, hasn't it?
For a long time. Yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky to have it and to have the PTs there and the coaches, just the facilities in general. But it has very much been my home as I've been working through this injury.
Well, let's start out with the good news first, and then we'll go back and find out how you got into this position. But you got back on skis last winter. You've been training over the summer. Give us a little bit of an outlook on what your plan of attack is for getting back into competition this year.
Yeah, it's, let's see, I started skiing back in February and just kind of took my time free skiing a lot, getting comfortable, finally rejoined my team for a quick camp in Mammoth, then full on training in Argentina and Chile this fall. Just got back a week ago from Coralco in Chile. And I'm feeling pretty good right now. I'm skiing pretty much without pain, feeling more and more confident. Finally skied downhill for the first time about 2 weeks ago. And so I think one more block in Copper, I'm really excited to finish getting that confidence back, and hopefully at that point I'll be ready to step in the start gate. And if that goes to plan, then my first race should be the St. Moritz World Cups, the first weekend in December. I'm going to sit out the first downhills in Zermatt because they're only a couple weeks away, and I'm just not there yet.
So what's kind of your mental attitude? Are you excited? Are you a little bit of trepidation? How are you looking at going into St. Moritz?
It's definitely a mix of everything. I mean, I got injured over 2 years ago, but I missed the season before. I was injured to deal with an eating disorder too. So I haven't actually been in a start gate since February of 2020, which is more than 3 years ago. So there's been a lot building to this moment to finally getting back in a start gate. And I've had a lot of time to think about what I want from it. But most of all, I mean, what I'm looking forward to when I finally do get in that race start is just getting to feel the race day jitters again, and to get to compete on the world stage. And as I like to always tell myself, like, go out there and put on a show. And I hope that I'll be ready to put my best foot forward.
How is St. Moritz as a race course for you?
I've only skied the Super G there, and this year I'll be doing at least the downhill training runs, and depending on how those go, I'll also race the downhill. It's a really fun hill. It's pretty technical, and I prefer technical courses. So it's got a lot of terrain, can be really flat, light, which coming back from injury is always a bit of a challenge, but I'm excited that my first race will be somewhere that I'm familiar with. I've raced that Super G 3 or 4 times. And I'm just hoping it's similar to what I've experienced there before, and it's hopefully a technical set and I can enjoy turning a little bit.
Good. Well, you seem pretty excited about it. I'll give you that.
Oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I feel ready, at least mentally. I feel very ready.
Let's go back to the injury, September of 21, a training injury. Walk us through what happened that day and then the subsequent challenges with your recovery.
Yeah. I mean, we were deep into the camp. It was first run of the morning up on the glacier in Saas-Fee, and wasn't even pushing that hard. It was just kind of a first run of downhill, feel out the course, like any first training run at a race. And I came into the second to last gate. There was a little ice chunk from the glacier breaking down overnight that I couldn't see in the flat morning light. Inside ski hit it, knocked it into my other boot, and I ended up coming into a compression in the finish, just completely sideways, and body mass went over my leg. I mean, luckily, my coaches were able to come to me immediately. I was surrounded by incredible staff, doctors, PTs, there were a bunch of teams there, and so many people came to my aid immediately. They got a helicopter up there, I think within 15 minutes. So I was not suffering for long. And then was whisked away, spent a week in the hospital there before my dad actually came over and flew with me back to the US, where I could get evaluated a bit more, and found out that it was also my knee that was damaged. I had broken my tib fib, and they put a rod in that the day that it happened. But unfortunately, they put a rod in that was a little bit long for my tibia. And so they actually couldn't start the ACL healing process until the rod came out. So it really stretched things out. Hence, I haven't raced in 2 years because it had to be a very piecemeal process, which was pretty gutting at the time. Honestly, mentally, it was heartbreaking to go from what was hopefully a 6-month recovery from just the broken leg, and maybe a 9-month recovery if I could get my ACL fixed right then, to minimum 1.5 years, because everything was going to have to happen one step at a time. And to have already missed a season for racing and to be missing an Olympic year, it was pretty brutal right off the bat.
Yeah. Let's go back even further and talk about the eating disorder, which was actually before the injury, and just give us a little background on that, how it manifested itself and what it took for you to battle that.
Yeah. Thank you for asking, because I think it's a topic that doesn't get talked about very much. And I'm glad that mental health is more on the forefront these days. I mean, COVID hit, and I think, everyone was affected mentally by it. It was such a harsh change from every routine we were used to. And I had been struggling a lot with my mental health in years leading up to it, especially body image. And when COVID hit, it seemed to just be, for me, the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was stressed and I didn't feel like I had control over anything in my life. And the way I manifested finding control was by controlling everything that I was eating. And it's incredible how quickly that took hold of me, and how hard it was for me to understand what was going on and to accept what was going on. It wasn't until October, so that happened kind of March, was when things really started escalating. And it wasn't until October of 2020 that I got told by a doctor that I had anorexia. And then even for another month, I was lucky to have all the resources that I did through the US ski team, where I had like an outpatient therapist, a dietitian, a lot of people monitoring me every single day. And still by mid-November, nothing had changed. And I was in so deep that I needed to go to a partial hospitalization treatment program. And that was kind of the only option to turn things around at that point.
I'd like if you could talk a little bit about the role that Jessie Diggins played for you. Jessie, Olympic champion in cross country, has also been very outspoken about this and trying to get the message out there, but she really influenced you, didn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I found out that I had to go to treatment, and that was kind of the decision that my team and I made, right away, a couple of coaches said, have you thought about reaching out to Jessie Diggins? And I was like very shy. I didn't want to. God, I'm not going to bother her. Like, her season's about to start. And finally, someone gave me her WhatsApp contact info. So I sent her a message that just said, hey, like, I know you're super busy. You don't have to reply. Like, I'm going to treatment, and I've read parts of your book. And if you have any advice for me, that would be awesome. And she responded within hours. It was incredible. Just right away. So comforting. Just, I know where you're at. I have been there. It's going to be really difficult right now, and I can promise it gets better. Like, just, she then stayed in touch with me for months and months, where she would check in on me and ask what headspace I was in, and could give me tips for getting through treatment, just the hours of different therapy sessions and kind of the complications that come with it as an athlete. And I've looked up to her so much, and I respect so much of her vulnerability right now with her statement earlier this summer that she's struggling right now. I mean, I've reached out to her a little bit because I would like to be a resource to her as much as she was to me. But I'm really happy that she's surrounded by a really strong team. And I think we're both really lucky that we have an amazing organization around us, and that we're able to talk about it.
I know she's training out at the Center of Excellence right now. Have you run across her in the last week or two?
I've seen her from afar across the gym. I haven't actually had a chance to talk to her yet.
Well, she's been a great spokesperson. I know she's raised the awareness for a lot. Let's talk about avalanche safety now. Growing up in New England, I know you did know Ronnie.
I did. I was lucky enough to know Ronnie for a few years back when I was still at SMS, and he was an up and comer on the ski team.
I don't know how much, I mean, or how much backcountry skiing do you do? Are you pretty much a racer on piste, or have you been known to get off the trail and get into the powder a bit?
I'm a very classic East Coaster. I am a sucker for a good groomer. No experience with powder skiing. I did during COVID get into a little bit of touring and started going into the Utah backcountry a little bit. But having already done some BRASS courses at that point, I was always very careful to check the reports every day. I always went out with a beacon and a probe and a shovel. And I always went with people who were more experienced than myself, because I know that I know nothing, and always wanted to make sure that I was making the right decisions. I wouldn't go out if any aspect was anything but green. And I honestly operated with a lot of fear, because I know that I don't know very much about being in the backcountry.
I know that you've been away from the team a lot over the last couple of years, but over the past, say, 5 or 6 years, have you noticed a changing attitude amongst your fellow athletes, a greater sense of awareness of avalanche safety?
Definitely. I think we've instituted the BRASS courses into kind of our US ski team protocol. And I think that's been really huge for all of us. I mean, a lot of us older athletes on the team knew Bryce and Ronnie, and it's impacted each of us in a lot of personal ways. And so we take avalanche safety very seriously. But seeing the younger generations now come in and also still take these courses really seriously and show up to ski in the backcountry with all the, appropriate tools and care about being safe out there is really cool to see.
Cool. Alice, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Do you have any final thoughts before you head off to the season?
Honestly, just thank you to SMS, who I know there's a bunch of people here for supporting me. Thank you to the US ski team and everyone who supported me. I know there are a lot of people on this call who have kept me afloat over the last few years, and I'm really grateful to all of you guys.
Well, thank you for joining us, Alice. We will be rooting for you in summer.
Thank you so much.
Have a great preseason.
Thanks.
That's Alice Merryweather. We appreciate her being with us here tonight. And before we do, one more chance for you to scan that QR code in the upper right and make a donation to help BRASS. We're going to close it out tonight, as we always do, with the showing of Off Piste. And as many times as I've seen this film, I still get choked up. This is a very real recreation of the accident, with some great advice from some really noted athletes. So we appreciate the time that you spent with us tonight. We ask you to just spend a few minutes more to watch this 13-minute film, Off Piste.
Ronnie! You guys see him up there? Guys, what should we do? Start digging!
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons.
Dispatch, possible 2 avalanche victims buried. 2 here. I see something. Is this one of your friends?
Yeah, that's Bryce.
No pulse. Starting CPR. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Lift on 3. 1, 2, 3. Are you sure there were only 2?
Yeah, there's 2.
There's 2. Okay, we're gonna find him.
Ronnie!
Not breathing, no pulse. Starting CPR.
Nature can turn deadly in a matter of seconds.
It's hard to believe that such a tragedy could happen.
The accident has left many in the skiing world in shock.
Tragic news tonight as 2 elite skiers training for a spot on the U.S. Olympic team are killed in an avalanche.
Rescue crews from Solden were on the scene immediately with multiple helicopters.
Our thoughts and prayers are with those who are apparently lost in this specific incident.
Go for it, Brycey!
Who are you? I'm Bryce Astle. How does the gangster chains play into effect in your slalom skiing? Pretty aerodynamic.
Happy birthday
was shattered, and I know everyone around me was too, and can't even possibly imagine what it was like for the families.
Losing Bryce and Ronnie was a huge hit to the U.S. team. They're the next generation. These two guys were the best in their disciplines. Bryce in slalom, Ronnie in downhill and Super G. They were the next up-and-comers. They could be the guys competing in the Olympics.
This is the famous smile because he had just won U.S. Nationals Juniors.
He always had my back, and it makes you appreciate it more now that he's not here, you know?
Bryce was such an important part of my life, and after we lost him, it was a pretty easy decision for my wife and I to name our son Bryce.
He lived for every moment. He would get done training and he would go out and he would ski.
And this is a card that we made up at the time we lost the boys, and it has Bryce, so amazing on skis, and Ronnie in his element going 70 miles an hour through the air. He was kind, and he was grounded.
Ronnie, he was always just a jokester. He wasn't afraid of the World Cup vet. He would just always speak his mind to me, and I love that about him, you know?
Watching him laughing just made me think, wow, I have the best brother ever.
He was a good teammate, he was a good friend, a good son, and we had a lot of fun together.
January 1st, 2015, I took Bryce to the airport. He was going to hook up with Ronnie Burlack and the rest of the U.S. ski team. They were going to Europe to train for Europa Cup.
We got to Solden, and it had just snowed a lot.
Obviously, there's no training because there's so much snow. So we sent everyone out to go ski around and have some fun.
Just seeing snow that's untouched and being like, this is a dream come true.
We were having an amazing time.
We could see the bottom of the valley, we could see the road, so we started skiing.
I just remember skiing across this face, and all of a sudden, I just heard cracking.
Everything underneath me started moving.
I saw Bryce, and I heard him say, oh shit. I never even saw Ronnie. We stood there, and we watched them go. Nothing made any sense. Then it just instinct took over, and there were people who had skied down right before us who saw everything and pulled out their transceivers.
Are they wearing beacons?
No beacons. No avalanche equipment.
I need shovels.
That was when I realized how stupid we were being.
Okay, does anybody have a probe? We're at the bottom of Solden 1. We need helicopter, 2 more patrollers, hasty team, then AED.
Probably took 15 minutes for helicopters to come in.
I was pretty aware that it had been too long. The first thing that appeared was Bryce's boots sticking up out of the snow. He was upside down. His boot was 6 feet from the surface. Came across Ronnie a few minutes later.
Ronnie, we got him. Did you get him out of the hole?
That was an image that I'll never forget.
The concept of riding up a lift, skiing on a trail, and we're in danger That did not exist in any of our heads.
The coaches and the boys did not receive any orientation or any training regarding the dangers of skiing in Europe versus skiing in North America.
None of the young men in that group knew the difference between on and off-piste. Off-piste in the United States is defined as out of bounds, going through the gate, going under the rope. That's not what the rules are in Europe. When you are off the groomer, you are off-piste.
In Solden, the day before the avalanche that killed Bryce and Ronnie, there had been heavy snowfall and strong winds. What that did is it put a lot of weight on top of the snowpack, which was fragile. Once these skiers got onto that slope, it couldn't support the additional weight. That weak layer fractured over a wide area, and that slab came crashing down. It produced debris that weighed almost 7 million pounds, the same as almost 10 747s.
It takes all of 20 minutes to learn and to be educated.
You want to make sure you're prepared. There are 5 points that are always really good to remember. You want to get the gear, get the training, get the forecast, get the picture, and get out of harm's way.
First, you need the gear. Going in the backcountry, you need a beacon, a probe, and a shovel. And unfortunately, that day in Solden, the boys did not have that.
I would have done anything for rescue gear, especially a shovel.
You can always increase your chances of being searchable if you're unlucky enough to be caught in an avalanche by having reco reflectors in your equipment and clothing.
Getting the gear is useless if you don't know how to use it. You've got to get the training. Take an avalanche class.
If we would have taken just one class, we would have known not to ski down that terrain in the first place.
One key thing you're going to learn in every avalanche class is that you have to check the forecast every time you ride.
None of us checked the forecast that morning. It would have taken just 2 minutes on the gondola ride, and none of this would have happened.
So when you're out on the snow, you gotta get the picture. And what does that mean? That means pay attention. Are you seeing recent avalanches? That's by far the most important clue. That's like Mother Nature screaming in your ear.
If we had known it wasn't controlled, we 100% would not have been there.
Finally, get out of harm's way. What that means is only one person is riding the slope at a time.
We were breaking one of the simplest rules. In some ways, it's a miracle that all 6 of us didn't die.
Once you get to the bottom, you need to get out of the way. That way, if somebody else in your group triggers an avalanche, you won't be caught.
These 5 simple steps everyone should know about, and everybody should be trained in. Coaches, parents, athletes, administrators of the program.
Everything that we did could have easily been prevented. I wish I could say that I couldn't have done anything to save their lives. That's just not true.
Anytime you have a major accident like this, it causes a ton of introspective thought. We realized that we really needed to look at it from the top down, bottom up. How can we make sure everybody's more educated to avert and reduce the chance of anything like this ever happening again?
That's why we at BRASS are creating avalanche education specifically for coaches and athletes. We're also creating snow safety policies to be followed by ski racing groups.
Ski racing is definitely a dangerous sport, but what we're going down is a really highly regulated area. You have all the fencing, you have the snow prep, you have all these things that are out there to keep you safe. When you get out there in the backcountry, there's none of those luxuries.
For the people who assume that just because they know how to ski terrain or they know how to rip down a mountain because they ski downhill, it's a very different beast.
Don't let this happen to you and your family. Get educated, get out there, so we can keep skiing for Bryce and Ronnie, so their legacies live on.
I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. This film is so poignant, but it is real. It really happens. And we hope that tonight that you've gotten a little bit of an understanding to help you be a little bit safer this winter. Again, folks, take a look at the QR code and scan that if you could in the upper right. A big thanks to Backcountry Access, BCA. If you're looking for some of the gear that you've learned about tonight, go check it out at Backcountry Access, BCA. Thanks for joining us here with BRASS 101. We have another session coming up on November 2nd, and then in early January, we'll have our annual Bryce and Ronnie Day program. Thanks very much. Have a great season.